Hello. This is Uncle Tickles. You're here watching the TMC podcast. That's the movie club. It's like a book club, but with movies. And today we're talking about the most unique movie we have watched, featured, chose for this first season of the movie club. We are joined today, luckily, by Ashaya, who is, it is known, she is the best. It's a really exciting day. Ashaya, please introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hey there. As he said, I'm Ashaya. I do History of Westeros podcast. And it's been quite a while since I got to talk about anything besides that. I cover The Expanse when the season is going. I've had a few chances to do that with Daily DVR or with Fandom Media. But other than that, I've covered Better Call Saul too, but I really haven't had much of a chance to cover other things. So this will be fun for me to just talk about another movie.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's an incredible, testament to you that there is a phrase or saying, and that is just simply Ashaya is the best, and that's sprouted up amongst the community. So because of that, and in the spirit of that, we kind of bent the rules at the TMC Club for you. Normally, our guests put forth 4 movies, and then our listeners decide and pick one of those 4. This time, we had the guests choose what they thought Ashaya. No one picked. Scott Wartman had messaged me and said he was going to pick it, erased it, and pick something else.
And Sean, who you had on for The Graduate, just knew because I asked him. I was like, do you think if I do a poll, anyone would ever choose to cover Fantastic Planet? And he was like, no.
I had never seen it. I probably wouldn't have chosen it. Just, or maybe I would have because it was the one I haven't. And in fact, I take that back because you gave me the choice of 1 or 2 films, and I did choose it. So in a way, I did. And there's Scott. Scott's joining us live. He says Ashaya is the best.
Scott.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why you chose this. I'm again very happy you did. And we were talking a little off screen. I went through a little bit of a roller coaster with this film. We'll talk about that as well. But why did you pick this?
Well, I had just a really interesting experience when I first saw it, and it really stuck with me. And so I had to see it again. And then it came out in theaters here. So I got to see it in theaters, which was its own experience. And I kind of just went through different interpretations after each viewing, where different things stuck with me. So I thought there was a lot of depth in it, despite it being short. It's only an hour and 12 minutes. And, there's just, anyone who's watched it, it's just a huge allegory. And it's an allegory that you can apply to many things.
Oh, my
God.
Yeah.
I wanted more people to watch it.
Well, I think the runtime is actually one of the things. There's a couple of big things that rank above it, but the runtime is what makes it, rewatchable, is because it does go by pretty quickly. And it is the shortest movie we've covered here as well, not just the most unique. Talk about that first experience you watched the film under, because I am interested to hear this.
Okay, so I have a list on Letterboxd where I like to curate movies that are psychedelic, that are trippy, that would be fun to watch when you are not sober. So I was tripping quite hard, and I picked this movie out with my friend. I said, let's do some Fantastic Planet tonight. And it starts off with, like a woman running, holding a baby, but like she's running kind of funnily to me. So we were laughing at her, like a disembodied hand kind of comes out and it's flicking her. And, we're not sober, so we're just laughing very hard. And then it just turns very dark. So it was just kind of a roller coaster of emotions where it was very laughable, though, because of the narration and the weird way that the characters looked. It was just this weird experience where some of it was very funny and some of it was very sad.
Yeah, I know there's one person listening who's very glad to hear that you laughed at that scene, and that's my wife. I don't know if you saw her Instagram story, but so she was not sober when we watched it. A different substance. I think she was just not sober on wine. But she was laughing quite hard at that opening scene. But that opening scene, here's the deal. we'll get into this a little bit more, I think, when we talk about the the different allegories that are going on in this. But we come to find out, it's this woman, she's carrying a baby, as you said, she's being flicked by this big blue hand. And then as it kind of pans out, you see that it's these drags, this large alien race, and they're kind of playing with it, and they've killed it. That hit home to me so hard, just simply because as a dad to a 3-year-old, we just had this happen. My son Shep was playing with a millipede, and he was, and he's playing with it, and he doesn't know how hard, he doesn't understand that yet. And, it was almost exactly, I think the wording was almost, he's like, Dad, it's not moving anymore. And I had to, explain to him, like, yeah, it's dead. You got to be more gentle. So very much like this is, I don't know, it's like that really hit home, not to mention just the fact of mother with a child and, and she's dead. So that as a parent hit hard as well. So you mentioned each time kind of picking up different things. The first time you watch it, as you said, not sober, was your first takeaway like, this is just a weird, funny movie?
My first takeaway was I was just thinking a lot about the animal rights part of it right off the bat. I have to say, I didn't settle after seeing it like, oh, it's about this. Just throughout it, I kept thinking about animal rights. Even when it came to like the extermination, I was thinking about it in terms of that, the culling. And of course, when you watch it another time, then you're like, oh, this can be about genocide and slavery and all of these different topics. And it works for all of them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the animal rights thing stuck out to me on my first watch too. It was one of the movies, I'm a meat eater, I do. And there's been a few times that I've questioned that. One was after watching the movie Okja. And then, the second time was after watching this. I really was like, kind of had me just really, not only, I think we'll get to this again later. I don't want to get on all these topics yet, but also I looked at owning a pet differently. So it had me look at domestication, animal rights, that sort of thing. Before we get too deep into all of this stuff, I do want to talk about one other thing. The movie that was almost chosen, and if Lita was happy to hear that you laughed during that opening scene, she's going to be heartbroken to hear that you gave me the option to choose this movie and I didn't pick it. What was the other movie?
Return to Oz, which is a top tier movie for me. And in terms of, a lot of people saw Fantastic Planet when they were very young, I have to say, and it kind of scarred them. If you look at YouTube videos, people will say that they saw it as a child.
Yes.
For me, I saw Return to Oz as a child. My uncle put it on, and I was a huge Wizard of Oz fan, so we put the movie on. And it's so disturbing and dark and just like this, just very psychological. And so I finished it and I read the books, all the Oz books, which are partway in between the Wizard of Oz movie and Return to Oz in terms of how dark they are. They split the difference, I'd say, but they're definitely weird as well. But I wanted to talk about Return to Oz specifically because I think of it as this really good example of what they call the heroine's journey, which is like a counterpart to the hero's journey, which is the hero's journey. They get like a call to adventure, right? A call to action. In the heroine's tale, she's dealing with this psychological trauma. She's going away to this weird other world to come home to work through this inner conflict, basically. And so if you think about it, like Alice in Wonderland is one example of it.
Totally, yeah.
Probably comes to mind for most people right off the bat. And I wanted to share a quote from Joseph Campbell when I was looking for just examples for this. He said this, Joseph Campbell, the creator of the hero's journey: women don't need to make the journey. In the whole mythological tradition, the woman is already there. All she has to do is realize that she's the place that people are trying to get to. And he said this, and he taught at Sarah Lawrence College.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so real, like, yeah, next time you want to cite here Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, let's kind of put some things into context a little bit. That is a good reminder. Laura Brando's also a big Return to Oz fan, says Return to Oz is the best. Maybe you'll have to come back in season 2, and it'll be easy for people to guess which one you're doing then.
Yes. But yeah, I do wonder how many kids saw Return to Oz and were very scarred.
I saw it, and you know what? I guess maybe I was just a little jaded. I was, I was exposed.
Yeah, how
to
old were you?
Gosh, what year did that come out?
Oh, the 80s.
So, I mean, I was born in 82, so I couldn't have been very
Okay.
old. So,
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, seeing it that young, one of my favorite things in researching Fantastic Planet was coming across some of the, the stuff on YouTube where they talk about how this was a movie that parents just picked up because the cover of the movie, thinking, oh yeah, my kid will like this, and then, coming back and having their kids exposed to that, I really got a chuckle out of that. I do have a question related to, I had to bring something, George, related to this. So, one of my big questions on my first watch was, did George find some inspiration from the Carthene way of dress from this movie with the one strap and the single breast exposed?
Yeah, I know that's.
I find it hard to deny that maybe that was something he wasn't drawing inspiration from.
Yeah, obviously your question was like, oh, what a joke. But it always makes me wonder with things that came out during this time period. That's when George was he's still part of sci-fi. This is a sci-fi movie. This was a big deal when it came out. It's based on a science fiction book by an author who's written a bunch of stuff. I can't imagine that he doesn't know about it, isn't familiar with it, honestly.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I found another, maybe, and this is a stretch of a parallel, but I found it very, very late. In fact, I found it going through my closet. One of the things I like to do in a nod to Aziz is try to tie in a shirt to the show.
Yes.
And so the shirt I'm wearing, Ashaya, can you guess perhaps where I'm going with the connection?
Yes, because of their trippy meditation and how their eyes, their lidless eyes are just they're just all red and then they just go gray.
That's right. And it's kind of like Bran going into the Weirwood net a little
bit.
A little bit. So again, this is I'll probably say this a lot to the point where it sounds like I'm, beating a dead horse, but this is the most unique movie because it's so unique. I do want to do just, something we normally don't do in a quick plot recap, right? The movie's, as you said, only an hour. What we have is, this world, what is it? Yadrag or Egom, where there is a large, giant humanoid blue race called the Drags. They are technologically advanced and superior to the Ohms, which are very human-like and really kind of take the place of a pest and pet in the world of these Drags. As you mentioned in the beginning, we have a woman. She's killed by some children Drags who are just playing with her, and another child takes our I guess we'll call him our main character, right? Ter.
Yeah.
He's the main character, I suppose. So he's taken in by this child Drog, where he is exposed to education through actually some accident, a happy little accident in his collar. He gets exposed to knowledge. He then escapes, brings it to wild Ohms, illuminates them after a little bit of resistance to what he brought, which is this Drog knowledge. They escape. They're eventually able to kind of build a city and replicate Drog technology where they can go to another planet, save their species, through essentially mutual destruction and ensure a safe, peaceful existence with the Drogs. That's, I think, a quick recap. That's fair enough, Ashaya?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
100%. I agree.
Okay. So, we're doing this because, it's unique in the visuals and, the auditory experience that this movie gives you, but it's also unique in that, the character development is kind of non-existent. The characters are kind of more symbolic of things, I would say, than they actually are. You get to spend knowing them. But like you said, the themes are obvious. The way the Drags view and treat the Ohms, as if, and I don't know. This is probably a good place for you to step in because, it's in part as a pest, but it's I think a way that they justify this, this evil treatment of them by dehumanizing them, right?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
They're de-dragifying them, I suppose.
Right.
Really, there. But no, that is basically exactly what I think, that they dehumanize them, and then it's easy to shoot out little tabs that just kill all of them and de-arm the park, and that some can walk past, and just that, oh, look at how gross they are. It just makes you think about, seeing people in the city and how, privileged people want to keep moving farther and farther away. They're dirty and I don't know. It's not fun stuff to talk about right there.
No, but
But
it's
I
also
think
no. Go
I
ahead.
think for me the most significant thing really was the knowledge part that you were bringing up, which was just how much knowledge is the key to, breaking free of slavery, breaking free of the shackles of slavery, and, starting a revolution. You need knowledge and education.
Now, let me ask you this: do you think, because there is a scene when Ter arrives to the settlement of these wild elms, and he's carrying a device that allows him to transmit the knowledge of the drags to the elms, and there's resistance, as I said, from like they call him the wizard, the octopus hat guy.
Yeah.
So, do you think that that's and I'm trying to. As someone who's a non-believer, I don't want to say that represents religion, but that's kind of how I took it. And part of it was because there is this scene, and I'm spoiling a little bit. It's like a procreation scene for the alms, and there's like a sacrament that happens before that's very Eucharistic, where they take this glowing thing, they eat it, and then they glow, and then they go off and they become lightning bugs and bang. And I don't know. It seemed like maybe, wizard, magic, religion. I don't think there's I think sometimes there's very similar.
Yeah, I think that Ter was kind of, a counterpoint to the wizard, that he was bringing knowledge to, religious culture that didn't have that, and that he sees their kind of animalistic self when he's like peering and sees them all mating and running around, and he's not part of it. I think that is symbolic of that, and that they kill the wizard. That he's gone eventually, that they, religion is dead, I suppose.
Well, and it's the knowledge that allows them to escape. It's the knowledge that allows them to learn of the culling, the extermination. It's the knowledge that allows them to replicate the technology. And in the end, it's really like that ability that I think kind of allows the Drogs to see them in a little bit different light, in large part. I was really intrigued by the relationship that knowledge has in this. I wasn't quite there. I have a quote here. It's a little long. Did you want to read it?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes, and I think it kind of captures the idea of what originally was happening when Ter shows up at the settlement. It's by Bill Hicks, the comedian.
The world is like a ride in an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real because that's how powerful our minds are. The ride goes up and down, around and around. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Many people have been on the ride a long time, and they begin to wonder, hey, is this real or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us and say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up. I've got a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account and my family. This has to be real. It's just a ride. But we always kill the good guys who try and tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok. But it doesn't matter because it's just a ride. And we can change it any time we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. Just a simple choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your doors, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defenses each year and instead spend it feeding and clothing and educating the poor of the world, which it would pay for many times over, not one human being excluded. and we could explore space together, both inner and outer, forever in peace.
And I probably could have cut that quote halfway off, but I think the end is just so, it's just
No,
a
I think
beautiful reminder, and it's a good, message to share.
no, I think it is definitely a great quote, and it makes me think of, I mean, the Alms, they did have to have weaponry to find some equality.
Did you find any symbolism? I mean, because I spent some time mulling over this, the symbolism of when they do finally kill the Drog, kind of in the hecticness of the culling.
Yeah.
Did you take anything from that? I mean, I know we didn't have anything in the notes about that, but I guess just thinking about it now, I was wondering. I didn't come up with anything good, but
I mean, in general, that scene, and there was the other scene where they kill that siren bat creature.
Yeah.
What I took from from those multiple scenes, I mean, and they're like cheering and like drinking its blood and bathing in it, was just like the savagery of death, and the fact that we might be thinking of these Alms as, oh, there are real heroes, but they're still kind of rejoicing in death, I suppose, is what I took from that.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, there's so much to unpack here that there's probably, you could, continue to watch this and find something new. As you've said, you've done, and just, you've got to get in the heads of some of these people. Going back to some of the major themes, we talked about racism, we mentioned it, slavery, oppression, human rights, genocide. I think they're all kind of tied together. I think it's really easy to see how the Ulms kind of are the stand-in. In the beginning, we see Terror literally put into shackles in what the 70s, I believe, thought what like a 3D printer would look like when they make it, which I thought was a pretty interesting. Just
those sounds, though. Let me say again, I was not sober, and then that sound starts. It's really unpleasant.
Well, I thought
I mean it's the right sound to be made when you're making a shackle for someone.
For sure. But also, I wonder if the 70s were thinking like we would have, we wouldn't consider some sound design when we would design our in the future, we're going to make a 3D printer. Maybe we're going to make it not sound so annoying.
I mean, the Drogs probably, for all we know, they think that's a beautiful sound.
That's so true. I mean, I also wouldn't think eating smoke would be my choice way of
smoke. Is that, I consider that like a cloud.
A cloud, yeah.
How they just like suck. That was definitely, I wrote it in the notes because that scene made me laugh very hard.
It's a weird scene. Yeah, there's a lot of scenes that made me laugh. Like, I don't know whether they were intentionally, supposed to. And, I wasn't totally sober. I actually thought about taking mushrooms, for one of the watches. But some of the music is just so unsettling. I just was I was just really concerned. I'm like, I'm very, when I'm in that headspace, I'm very auditory. And I was like, I don't know. Can I recover from this? I don't know.
Some of that sound design is so good too. I mean, from the opening notes, right, of the movie, it's got this like that funky psychedelic jazz, but it's got like these animal chirps like mixed in to set the stage. I mean,
I will, again, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but strongest performances, which is a category we always have, we have to go a little non-traditional for just because of the nature of this film. I said it's unique. Maybe the sound and music might be one of my choices there. In connection to the knowledge, the idea of knowledge being, the key to your shackles, that was something that was real with slavery too. Slaves, it was illegal for slaves to read and write after Nat Turner's rebellion. Well, I think all of the states with this exception of 2 or 3, but knowledge was something that, was used and kept away from a population to help oppress them, help enslave them. We see when the Drog parents learn that Terror is listening, they don't like that. No. And they don't necessarily plainly state like, hey, we just don't want, it was just more so like, we don't want our daughter to be distracted. But, I think the parallel was meant to be drawn there 100%.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, a lot of education was spread to slaves through their being someone who was willing to teach them to read in, the people they were slaves to, one not decent person, but one Tiwa who was like, oh, I want to teach you how to read, my cute little, that sort of person. And then once they're able to keep, spreading it and teaching other people to read, it can be immensely helpful. So yes, I do think of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not just we don't have to theorize how helpful it was. It was looked at as an integral part of Nat Turner's rebellion, and it's so much so that they made it illegal afterwards. So the culling, I think, as you mentioned, there's clear parallels to the Holocaust there.
Yeah.
And then we can get down to animal rights too, because they are referred to as pests. I think the way that you see them kind of come out of holes that look like little mouse holes. There's the scene where it almost looks like a magnifying glass burning ants. A lot of the imagery looks like people killing insects. So I don't think it's a super subtle allegory going on here. I think clear.
I mean, even from the get-go, you have when Master Sin, when Tiwa's father is like, yeah, you can keep him, you name him something. And she's like, Tiwa. She wants to name him after herself. Like, okay. It's kind of a weird choice. But he's like, no, name him Trusty. Yeah, it's like, you get the sense that, Master Sin, he does think of him as a pet, clearly. Yet they're still willing to just call them, which makes me think of dog. And how, we just kill dogs.
Yeah. Yeah.
We think, what are we supposed to do? They're going to overrun us. But, that's exactly what the drogs are saying here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are, the one thing that I thought it was interesting, is that I thought the movie doesn't necessarily draw it doesn't necessarily say, hey, the Ohms are dogs, right? Because there are times that they're very insect-like or they're, it goes a bunch of different ways. But yeah, I think it does make you think of, okay, because we're technologically superior, because we value different things slightly. And, what was another thing that drove a lot of the movie was the life expectancy of both breeds or both species. So the drags live quite a bit longer than the Ohms, and then it's pointed out multiple times that the Ohms reproduce at a much faster pace, which is part of the things that allows the drags to be vulnerable when the Ohms go to this weird stone dancing planet. Yeah. Well, and I guess because I, by no means am going to sit here and say that I have a clear idea of what the meditation purposes was. I think it's somewhat clear, but your interpretation of what because they're showing as meditation being very important, and they're shown doing the drogs, that is, they're shown doing it quite often. So it's an integral part of their kind of like reproduction.
Yeah, that's what it seems to me. And the one thing I wonder is they bring up that they want to mate with beings from like across the galaxy, which made me really wonder, are there drogs on other planets, or do drogs mate with other creatures? And because they're in other bodies, I had a lot of questions about who they were mating with exactly, but it was not drogs from their planet.
Right.
It was clear.
Yeah.
So that was my big question. But yes, I think that's kind of, it was Tiwa was becoming a woman as well, which was why, Master Sin was like, you need to grow up. You need to focus on your studies. You're going to, lose your virginity soon, I guess, like become a woman. She's going to meditate for the first time. We see her do that. But I also noted that they have something they called imagining. And that's different from the meditation. And the imagination thing, that's my favorite visual in the whole movie, when they're like, imagination was so rich today, and their bodies are just kind of like melding with one another, and then like they become a leaf, and it's the coolest visual.
Yeah, so I was a sucker for a lot of the non-humanoid visuals, the different creatures and animals that existed. And again, this movie's unique because I thought that it was so unlike our world, right? Outside of the Ohms, everything else was so foreign, I guess
Yeah.
is the best word. It was just so foreign. It looked like a Salvador Dali painting is what it looked
Yeah.
like, that Jim Henson and Salvador Dali got together and got really pissed off or got weird. And Scott agrees with you. He says it is it is the best visual. We
But
also have,
you talk about it being surrealistic, and when you do research into the people behind it, that was 100% part of the new wave kind of movement they were part of. So
for sure. You know what? Because we're getting into, I think, some of our favorite scenes.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about some of our favorite scenes, or is there anything on the themes or the allegorical levels that we haven't touched on that you wanted to?
I think a lot of this will end up touching on the allegorical stuff as we get into it. So let's get into some of that. For me, one of these right off the bat is the crystals breaking scene, because when the crystals all pop up, it's such a beautiful thing that you're going through, right? And then Tara is getting stuck in it. It's very eerie. Tiwa saves him, but she takes her sweet time saving him. But as soon as Tara learns a way to destroy those crystals, he's just walking around destroying crystals. That's what he did with his knowledge, was just to wreak more destruction.
Yeah, no, I didn't consider that till you just mentioned that. I just, there's scenes like that, like where I'm like, I know this is symbolic of something that it's just going over my head.
Or like another one of my favorite creatures there was that laughing creature in the cage.
Yes.
That one is, I think, particularly obvious in that he just grabs critters and just beats them against the ground and never eats them. He just likes to kill things and laugh about it.
That one was just a very Salvador Dali, like almost like picturesque. And it's just disturbing, pointless violence. And the laughter is a great juxtaposition, against what's going on in that scene. That was a terrifying. I wanted to include that in my stories in some of the stories I was creating for this one, but that one really stood out. I'm glad you picked that.
Yeah, and I mean, there were a bunch of critters. Did you have one that really stood out for you out of the creatures? I've named a few, and I have another one I would name. It's one that you both shared, which was that egg when it cracks open, and the pig-like kind of
hippo.
Yeah, it's like a hippo.
Yeah, the two-legged hippo.
It comes up and it just licks it and eats it.
Yeah, so in our house we have a thing for baby hippos, which much to the chagrin of people from Cincinnati who are like over Fiona the baby hippo. We love them. It's my wife's screensaver on her computer.
I say that I have those pillow pets or whatever that were really popular? I have a hippo one.
Oh,
they're my favorite pet animal. The hippo is.
The hippo, they're fantastic. There was when we went to Africa.
Do you know about the Escobar hippos?
Oh yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, down in South America that he brought it in, and then they're now wreaking havoc on the ecosystem. Yeah, for sure, I do. They were I think our favorite animal. Probably our favorite when we went to Africa. By the way, hippos make the weirdest sounds. Just if you ever get to enjoy listening to some hippos at sunset in South Africa, it's a pretty surreal experience. You hit the nail on the head. Those creatures were my two favorites. The crazy bird that just smashes things. And was it a cage bird? Was it in a cage?
Yeah, it was in a cage, or the cage was part of its body. It's not clear what's going on with that creature.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's another thing. Again, what makes this world that was created for this movie unique, beating this horse to death here, this dead horse to death, is that this world is so brutal, right? It's such a brutal world, and that kind of is illustrated again by in the scenes of the culling and that weird spider bat thing, just how many Ulms die when it's rarely like you just see one die. It's when you see them die, they're dying in large numbers.
And I mean, they're killing each other too. I mean, one of the scenes that really stands out to me, an iconic scene, is when the Ulms, when they have to fight each other with the creatures strapped on, when Tara is forced to fight. Yeah. And it's not just like, oh, you won, your creature's free and you're free. It's like, no, we're going to kill that creature too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a strange, it almost creates more questions than it does answers, as far as long term. I'd like another movie where it's just maybe another take on this, where we get a little bit more exposition on the characters and like how that rule came about. Give me the origins of just that fight rule.
I like that elderly woman who ruled the Hollow Bush gang, and then she came around and took over.
Nicodemus, we're going to talk about that a little bit. For being such a unique movie, I did find a couple parallels to some other movies we'll talk about a little bit later. Those were my favorite creatures as well. And I mentioned those as kind of like one of my favorite scenes. Just the lightning bug sex scene again. I just thought I'm not sure if I was supposed to laugh, but I was kind of like, what is going on? And then I think the religious imagery for me as a former Catholic, it was hard for me just not to recognize, the parallels between the Eucharist. And then, him kind of being the outsider looking in. And then, and I don't know why this made me laugh so much, but when they get to this, and maybe it was just like what I had in my head for what the expectation was, but when they get to the planet and we see where they're going to meditate, it's just these balls landing on statues, like headless statues, and they just like dance. And one of the things was like, oh, we had to be careful because the giant statues could step on us. I don't know. I found that whole thing so absurd.
I did as well. It is absurd. I think also you've brought up the lightning bug sexual ritual where they kind of like they go off and chase each other. It's not like they've picked each other out. It really has this very ancient feel to it, whereas the drags are in as far the opposite as possible, right? And that it's so sterile. They're even like they're on statue bodies and they're solely dancing. They're so far opposite to one another in terms of mating rituals.
Yeah, it is kind of incredible. And I'm sure there's actually more there to unpack.
I wonder how much psychedelics play into their perspective on all of that, because obviously, I mean, psychedelics are a huge part, but the people primarily taking psychedelics were the drogs, and they were the ones mating in such a way. So I don't know what to take from all of that, but I feel like the drogs are the ones who had the strong psychedelic influences on them. They were the ones meditating and tripping.
For sure. But there also is, just going back to the one really like ritualistic thing that we saw, like that Eucharist thing, they eat it, they start glowing. Could be, again, if you want to have evidence of some sort of psychedelics. And that is a good point. I think for The Graduate, we did this, and I think it's important to do it again for this film, like kind of framing it historically a little bit. Mm-hmm. It came out in 1973, but it took 5 years to make. So it begins getting made in like 1968. So, you're at the end of, the civil rights fight in the United States. Apartheid, I believe, apartheid's happening in South Africa at this time. As the movie kind of progresses in the stages of being made, you have counterculture, which the 70s start to happen. So these are the things that are the background of the film. Kind of makes some of the stuff that's happening in the allegories that are taking place, maybe makes sense a little bit more.
A little bit more, but then in other ways it doesn't to me, because again, like I mentioned, if the drogs are kind of this enlightened being, then it kind of goes counter to how I feel they are portrayed as, abusers, oppressors.
Well, I think it was just I don't know, and I'm not the smartest person, so maybe not the best person to take a stab at this. The way I looked at it was maybe the way that white European men had taken and held technologies from other populations, and then also use the fact that these other populations, these other races didn't have the same intelligence as them, which again, it's like pretty intuitive. If you're not allowing them to read and write, if you've kind of stymied their growth for X amount of years, and then say, well, look, they're not as intelligent as us. They don't have the imagination, which these were arguments that were being made about, other races at the time. Jim Crow laws weren't that far removed at that point. That was just a couple years, removed from the time we're talking about this movie being made. So these are the arguments. Those beliefs were held. They were pretty widespread at the time, and so these beliefs, the way that they kind of looked at them as a lesser species, were what allowed people to justify taking away these rights and treating them as something subhuman. So yes. Go ahead.
I was going to say, is this a good time for us to talk a little bit about the people behind the movie?
Yeah, I think so, because I was not so familiar. I'm glad you know a little bit more, and I'll kind of step in if I hear an opportunity to.
So notably, I wanted to do some research on Roland Topor because he's really credited for so much of the design, and his parents were actually Jewish refugees from Warsaw. They were from concentration camps, and his father was one of only 159 to survive. So obviously, Topor had that and rooted in his history. But he did not write it. Stephen Wool wrote it, who was also in the same age range. So I think he, would have been living in the fallout of that, also in France, where there were many Jewish refugees. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think even though he doesn't have as much of a personal experience of it as Topor did, I think that was, obviously where Stephen Wool was bringing it all from. But I think that this is why it really appealed to Topor, probably, to work on as a book to adapt.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, even if you weren't directly affected, France was occupied. So, I mean, he was, he doesn't had to have a parent in a camp to have been, affected and seen the horrors of it, for sure.
And so, fun facts I learned about Topor, which is that he was in Nosferatu, the vampire.
Really?
Yeah, it was just interesting. One is that. Two is that he wrote the novel for Roman Polanski's The Tenant. So that's kind of, he was a multi-hyphenate a little bit,
for sure,
as it turns out. And René Laloux, and this makes perfect sense to me, but I wouldn't have thought about it, which is that he began with puppetry in a psychiatric clinic. He was working with people there, which is very interesting and nice. But you can just see the puppetry influence on this completely.
René Laloux was, I thought, the most interesting person, because of the psychiatric experience, and then like his, using the psychiatric interns as writers as well. I thought that, really interesting if you want to look up, and learn a little bit more about René. Yeah,
and so I wanted to learn more about how they made the film, and it was made using what they call as a paper cut technique.
South Park is like a familiar user of that technique.
Yeah, that's a great example. And it said that the budget and working time was 25 people were employed for 4 years to create the 1,073 drawings. Just quite a lot. And notably, and it's hard for me to find the exact number, but the majority of them were women animators.
That's awesome. One thing I had also learned was that at the time this film was made, there had only been 12 animated films in France. So they actually didn't have the capacity to make this film, and they had subcontracted it out to Czechoslovakia, I believe.
Yeah.
Which was really, really interesting. Also, which there was one of the animators or one of the people involved on the Czech crew had said that in Czech animation, the characters serve more as symbols, which again, if you're talking about, hey, there's not a lot of character development in this, that's, somewhat by design, which I thought was really interesting.
Yes. I finally watched, well, I'd seen one of them, Topor, Laloux, and the composer for this, Alain. Sorry, it's very difficult for me to say. We looked it up, and I am struggling. But the composer of this great music, they all three worked together on 2 short films prior to this. And I had seen one of them, Les Escargots, which is about snails, obviously. But I hadn't seen The Temp More. I don't know. And that's from a couple years earlier, 1965. Did you watch this?
I did not. Okay,
I
do have it marked. As one of those. It's
a great companion to the movie because I mean it's also narrated. It's also got like some interesting weird creatures, some like very like similar imagery in general, surreal, like these broken bodies, but it's also got real footage of like
Really?
people killing each other and like planes exploding, and the narration is like talking about death is the number one primary resource for man. Like it's just laying into man for killing people. And I mean, it's brutal. It's pretty intense actually. Whereas it really made me think about how this alien planet helps give you this distance for the movie, whereas it's real heavy when you don't have that distance. It's not animated and it's real.
That just moved it a little bit further up my queue.
And then the other one I won't spoil because it's just like the other one is this
the snail movie.
Yeah, this one's a little sillier. Like there's a lot of meaning behind it, but it's also very weird and it's all animated. So just in lieu of being all animated, it can't nearly be as serious and dark as the other one was.
Well, one of the things that I was most shocked about as well is Alain, the composer. He was working on films into 2014.
Wow!
He composed a film, Saint Laurent, in 2014. I
want to check some of his stuff out now. For sure. How he's changed, because that like you said, that was a highlight for you, and it's a highlight for me as well. I think anyone who has seen it says that the music is crucial.
Yeah, and you know what? Scott says, and I got this in the notes a little bit later, a lot of songs sample the film, a lot of hip hop. It's mostly the hip hop that I saw some, DJ Shadow, not sure where, what category you put him into, but I did have one other thing. I actually saw it in your miscellaneous notes, and it was one of my favorite parts about the movie. And it ties into something we talked about earlier, which is the ridiculous outfits that Tear wears, when he first comes back to the wild group.
He's got the little poofies. He looks like a poodle.
Yes.
To me. And I laughed so hard at all of the outfits. Every time. And I was laughing extra at the idea of like someone cosplaying as Tear. And my favorite is the purple hat with the horn.
Which, speaking of that was another instance where I was like, I felt uncomfortable laughing when he strangles the guy singing. He's like, la la la. He's like, oh. It's like,
and I mean that said, like, there's a couple ways I could interpret that. I at first I was like, oh, he hates the singing. He's gonna shut him up. And then I was like, no, he doesn't quite know what Tiwa is telling him to do. They told him to kill the guy, and then the other guy wasn't biting. Well, Tiwa's like, go on, sing. I kind of think Tear, instead of choosing not to sing, that he didn't understand.
See, okay, so my interpretation of that was that he was kind of being like resistance to the he was resisting. He was like, sing. He's like, no, I'm not going to sing.
It's like, I'll be wild.
Yeah, and then this other guy's like, well, I'll dance for you. I'll do it. I'll do your jig. And he's like, fucking, I just told him I'm not going to do it, motherfucker. And he's like, I'm going to, all right, I don't know. That was my. See, and this is what's so interesting about a movie like this, right? Is that it's really open to interpretation. There's no wrong interpretation. And talking about it only makes the movie better because it gets you thinking along different paths. The outfits, I'm now trying to think of how I can like do a cosplay mashup between this and something A Song of Ice and Fire related.
I know his outfits are crazy. I've long thought that being a Drock would be like, just the head would be such a cool outfit. I was like, you could have the big red eyes. It's not, it would be difficult, but it's not the hardest cosplay to do if you didn't need it to be super, if you could just be like a human Drock. I don't know.
The ice cream man has been coming down our street more often recently, so we've been taking, Shep hears that we go outside, we get some ice cream. He brought home Sonic the Hedgehog ice cream. And the next day their faces were still dyed blue, and I looked at Lita and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna get a bunch of Sonic the Hedgehog and I'm gonna dye my face blue for the episode, and I was gonna have my breast cut out and just like expose and something. She was like, it might be distracting. I don't know.
That would be amazing, though. I love it.
See, that's what I thought. I was like,
I did look up Drog cosplay, and there's exactly one hero that did it, but like just their head.
Oh,
It's just a full head
and it's just like the whole
and
body.
a human body, like a human body with it's pretty weird looking. I highly recommend looking it up.
My other idea was just to do a tank top and just take the one like the one arm off, so it's just kind of like the ohm look. But
Yeah, the
yeah,
look.
and,
Those those French really like to show tits.
oh yeah,
Any opportunity, and I don't mind, but sometimes it was just kind of a weird time to do it.
yeah. I mean, I just chalk it up to the French being the French. But yeah, I just wonder. Yeah, that's probably like if I'm gonna be critical, like was it necessary? Like I don't know, just maybe just for more shock and like raw like.
I think it shows, how different their cultures are, and like, I think there's reasonings behind it besides titillating.
See, I see that as a parallel between the cultures because they both have their breasts exposed.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it can show you how similar those cultures are, but how different they are from us.
True. Yeah. Yes. That's an excellent point.
But Tiwa and Tear, their interactions had some. I mean, we mentioned the outfits, but there were a couple of other ones that were striking to me. One was literally striking to Tear, which is when she's just like torturing him by following him around with a tiny cloud that's just raining on him, and eventually just strikes him with lightning.
Yeah. That was very bizarre, which is weird because most of their interactions are, I guess, a little more tender.
Yeah, she's trying. That one is not so tender. Yes.
No, yeah. So I wonder. It's just kind of like and maybe it's just to show. And I think so. One other point I wanted to tie back with the outfits is it did remind me of like the domestication, right? As pet owners, like we now sometimes dress up our pets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if your pet, let's say you died, right? Or there was some world ending where just all the humans died and our domestic animals just were free the way that they are when we died. There'd be some that had to go into the wild in these ridiculous costumes, like little sweaters or like little tutus. And imagine how like a pack of coyotes is gonna approach a dog in a tutu. Probably.
I've never pictured that, but already at this point, there have to be animals that have gone into the wild in their outfits.
Yes, 1,000% that's happened.
Huh.
That's just and they've had to embrace by their wild brethren wearing these ridiculous costumes, right?
That is very good.
So that's real, and that's what we're seeing Tear do. He's being laughed at by the wild animals for his domesticated outfit.
There's this scene though with Tiwa, right? And Tear, do you remember she's trying to look like an and she she paints, she gives herself the eyes, and she's like getting the white stuff, the eyelashes. She's like wants to look like Tear, and it's sweet, but really it's like a spot on example of blackfishing, of the idea of like this is the lower class, but I want to look like them.
Yes. Yeah. And to go back even further to the point I was trying to, I think I forgot to close the loop was not only that, but it also, the rain cloud maybe is a demonstration of like, all right, here's like a version of a good or a good drag, right? And it's still not great. It's still pretty fucked up, And I think to me, again, I'm watching this movie for the first time. I think I watched it 4 full times. And my Lita comes down at some point. It was like both boys are napping. It's normally like the time we'll like watch a show, and I'm sitting on the couch listening to the soundtrack. And it's not like one of the more pleasant songs. It's like one of the jarring. Like she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm just getting ready for the show, babe." She's like, "Do you mind if we turn that off and watch something just that isn't giving me a little PTSD?" So I watch this. I watch this a lot, and gosh, that story just threw me off.
Yeah, that's great.
No, but yeah, that did truly happen.
But yeah, I mean, you're talking about she's a good drag, treating Tear better than most. I just think about when she first gets him, and he's like in the circus type thing, and she's like trying to reward him, and she just like rains down massive treats, like crushing him. It's painful, but he just grabs it, like grateful for what he gets.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to make. I'm like, the first time I watched it, I look at my dogs and I was just like, I think I'm a pretty good dog owner. I think I'm a good like pet owner. But like, is this, like, holy shit, like, are we doing the wrong thing by having pets? Should all these animals be in the wild? I don't know, but a great film makes you think about those sort of things. It makes you question things that you've just assumed are good your whole life, and now you have to be like, well, am I good, or am I the bad guy in this story?
Yeah, I think that's kind of why perhaps the animal rights stuff stuck with me, and I come back to it a lot, is because that's the more relatable part for me and for you, is that we're not struggling with, are we enslaving people, and are we committing genocide? Well, those things are happening in the world. Mm-hmm. So I can't say that, but either way, I'm not personally a part of that. I have cats though. I have 4 cats, so yes, I'm personally affected by that.
Sean says he thought of it like Maureen Ponderosa.
Oh, with trying to do the alms instead of.
I enjoy that take as well. You are a good person. You're not committing genocide. You love your animals.
But I keep 4 cats inside. They should be outside probably, but I don't want them to be killed. There's going to be a thing like that weird siren bat creature that's going to just come in. It didn't matter about the extermination when those things are going to come in and kill you.
Well, one of the cats is getting more outside time, right?
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
We're being very nice. He gets time outside every day, and he wanted it. The other ones don't care as much.
Yeah. So your niceness extends not just to your cats, but to fellow content creators. You were nice enough to actually watch the movie Trolls on my suggestion, because I had seen some parallels between this movie, Fantastic Planet, and Trolls. So I refrained from asking you your opinion until now. What did you think of Trolls? It's a big. I'm just gonna let you know it's a big favorite in the Pappas household. Okay,
I won't. Pony punch it.
It's okay.
I liked their covers of songs. Like, I liked the Sound of Silence. I hated the original songs. That's right off the bat. I did not like the original songs, but I liked their covers. They were really like interesting, unique, different kind of sounds. I liked that type of the music. So the music was somewhat of a hit, and it was pretty 50-50 for me.
But it's an integral part of the movie.
Yeah, it is.
Similar to Fantastic Planet, where like the music plays a big role in both movies.
And in terms of the rest of the movie, beautiful visuals, just like in Fantastic Planet.
Brutal landscapes, very unlike our world.
Yes, very unlike our world.
Some of the animals are vicious.
Yeah, and we've got that relationship, like we've got the Bergens and the Trolls, which are, obviously are our Drogs and our Alms. So a lot of similarities there. I could definitely watch it not sober, and that would be great. It would be beautiful.
Probably much more enjoyable.
But they both actually have narration, was something that I think having a framing device kind of helps as well.
Yeah, you have
for the Trolls, and like making it a little less heavy, I think.
For sure, the Trolls are, they escape into the wilderness, much like the Ohms as well. I just found the parallels to that very uncanny. Another film that, and they're both animated, obviously.
Yes. Also, there was also a kind of big father-child moment in both of them, which is where King Gristle tells Gristle Jr., like, yes, you can have a troll. Here's your little thing. Versus Master Sin telling his daughter Tiwa, you can have terror. Just take this little creature. You get whatever you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? There's a part of and going back to our original point outside of our introductions, which was like tying this back into some George R. Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire related content, which I know you're trying to get away from a little bit, but very much like the idea of like a child getting a pet that they might not be able to control quite yet.
Yeah,
it's also somewhat reminiscent of the Stark children and their direwolves. Like you get these, it's cute and cuddly now, but eventually it's going to grow up to be this thing that can cause a lot of damage and can eventually kill. So yeah, just thought of that. Starship Troopers was another movie, not animated, but just in the way that I think that you have, one species looking at another species as a pest or insect-like, the genocide, the eradication. The makers of Starship Troopers were very there's a very open about how they were trying to actually make the humans look like the Nazis, and they wanted it to be a parallel to the Holocaust and World War II. So, there's those parallels that also connect the two movies. And then the movie that, to me, and I was surprised, somewhat shocked when I went and did the research, because I thought I would find a bunch of stuff about how these two movies are connected, or how the makers of the movie that came later was inspired by the Fantastic Planet. I didn't find anything, nothing, not even like so much of a mention of this.
They were both based on books. Which book came first?
That's a good question.
I'm not sure. I really could not say.
The last time I tried to look something up while I was doing this, I got disconnected and got a blue screen, so I'm not going to do that. But
okay, 1971 is when the first Secret of Nim book came out or whatever, and
so Fantastic Planet book has to be first.
Yeah, because the movie was before that.
Yeah, they started making it in '68.
Yeah, when did the book come out? I'm just curious how quickly they did that turnaround. 1957.
Okay. So the both books come out relatively around the same time period, but Fantastic Planet is based on a book a little bit earlier. But yeah, Secrets of Nymph, which also I noticed in my notes I had typed in the Secrets of Nymph. So I was like, I wonder what movie Ashaya thinks I'm referring to. I hope she was able to figure out I was referring to the actual cartoon. Again.
You were when you put that in there and you were putting the parallels. I was just thinking about, I maybe at some point I would have been like, yeah, I've seen Secret of Nim, but then I think about it, I'm like, I saw that when I was 8-9 years old. I don't know that I really saw Secret of Nim. I don't remember most of what happens. I should stop saying I saw it.
You should go back and rewatch it. I went and watched it not too long ago. We tried to watch it with Shep, and I think maybe just a little too dark, or he just was, just maybe it was the animation was older. But I watched it again afterwards, and it was kind of one of those where, yes, there was a lot that it's weird. It's these experiences. One of the craziest things about being a dad is how it will reawaken these memories, and just like a lot of it's mundane. A lot of it's really, really, really mundane, but some of it's really visceral and really, and sometimes those visceral memories are woken by the mundane. And in this case, this movie brought back a lot of just, remember watching Secrets of Nim. I remember that was a movie I watched a lot as a child, but I also didn't remember a lot of it, as you said. So it was kind of like watching it for the first time. So for people who aren't familiar with the Secrets of Nim, it follows a field mouse who is trying to protect her children. She is, much in the way of like the culling. She finds out that the farmer's going to plow the field, so she has to move her family, but she has a sick child who can't be moved. They're able to kind of delay the culling, but she has to go to this basically a race of rats who live in a bush, which I thought was reminiscent of the Hollow Bush gang, in this movie, the Hollow Bush, who are led by Nicodemus. You find out that the Secrets of Nymph, NIM is an acronym for National Institute of Mental Health, and these rats were like experiments there, which allowed them to obtain human, technologies, and that allowed them to escape from the humans. And now they live here, but they need the human technology to live. And already I think just based on what we've talked about, you can see the parallels are numerous. There's they find out the Miss Brisby in the book. It's Miss Frisbee due to some like copyright and trademark stuff. They switched it from Miss Frisbee to Miss Brisby. Miss Brisby learns of the plot to exterminate the rats in the bush, so they're all able to escape through her learned knowledge from civilization deemed to be technologically more advanced. A lot of crazy stuff. Nicodemus, as I said, the head rat. There's some parallels to the older woman from the Hollow Bush gang.
I just want to point out the old woman and her tits. I'm sorry. I have to take a moment for that. I just applause to them for not saying that she just also has perfect tits.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe one of the strongest performances is her breasts. Any other movies that come to mind for you? I just kind of went off for a while there, parallels. Or do you want to touch on any of the similarities on those movies that I just listed?
I couldn't think about a lot of parallels. It makes sense to me that this is something that people think about. It's a common subject because it's a real thing that has happened, right? So like it makes perfect sense to me that they would hit similar points of slavery and hiding and knowledge and all of those things that they would hit beat by beat for Secret of Nim and for Trolls and for Fantastic Planet. But I don't know that many movies that get that dark, honestly. I watch a lot of comedies. I don't know any.
Yeah, no, this is, it is. It's a lot darker than Trolls for sure. Secrets of again,
it's once you say that, it sounds very dark. If you start getting into like psychiatric, experiments, then that's getting dark for me. That is, Return to Oz got into that with the electroshock therapy, right? And that stuff freaks me out for sure.
Yeah. A little bit earlier in the chat, Laura Brandos mentioned that there was a Disney movie called Something Wicked This Way Comes from a Ray Bradbury book. Not one I've catch, but she said that one fucked me up too. So another interesting one to put on the list.
I also, when I was researching those short films, right, by Lulu and whatnot, the snail one was apparently in this box set of like 600 good cartoons, and so like tons of parents bought it for their kids, and like most of the cat most of them are good, but
some of them some heavy subject matter, huh?
Yeah, then they hit this weird snail thing, which was scary.
Oh
yeah.
Boy.
Man, Gwen Stefani really sucks these days.
Yep. Blocked. Gone. Bye bye. So I think we could get into some of our strongest performances. I've kind of touched on mine quite a bit. The music, Elaine. Just because I said I would get to it a little bit later. The sampling, the major ones I'd come to were Madlib, Move Your Feet, Jay Dilla, Song 13, and then DJ Shadow has sampled this as well. I just thought, it was just, how is this happening? I thought
it's happened to me before. Yeah. It's weird they're the same name, but
blocked again. But the funky jazz I think is just probably the biggest character that kind of really rears its head. It's beautiful at moments, it's surreal, it's otherworldly, and then as we've already talked about, it's unsettling. Like there are for real moments when it's just jarring, and and I think that actually is a huge credit to Elaine, because I don't know. I'm trying to think of a movie. We did Almost Famous, which is music plays a huge role in that film, and I think that the music is actually a bigger proponent of this film than even that film. So that's just my humble opinion. And then outside of that, it's just the animators, the illustrators, whoever's idea it was to go in the direction that they went to create this really, really otherworldly type experience. And then we can I don't know how I can do that. Scott, I'm trying to make you a mod, buddy.
I think right click on the little dots in YouTube.
Let's see here. Oh.
On the three.
Yeah. I gotta get over to YouTube. I'm looking at it in stream.
Yeah.
But I think it's like the person who actually made the decision to go to make that decision, to go that Salvador Dali, that impressionist or the surrealist route.
Well, this is actually a good time to bring this up, I suppose, which is that I hadn't done as much research on them prior to this. It wasn't clear to me whose vision was what. And Lulu was a big collaborator of Alejandro Jodorowsky, who is known for doing like the Panic Movement and some really weird movies. Sean is in the chat, or was, and he can attest to. He saw The Holy Mountain. He was like, he came back from seeing it, and he was like, "This is one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen."
The Holy Mountain. I watched this this Saturday after a friend of mine, when we were talking. You've met just in passing. We call him No Content Jimmy. He was my friend who was with me at Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
So he was really jazzed when we chose this film. And then Saturday or Friday night, I was with him. We came back here after the bars, and he was like, "Well, have you watched it?" I said, "Yep." He's like, "You have to watch Holy Mountain." And that, again, I do think there are some very like distinct differences between this movie and Holy Mountain, where I think, I don't know that. Well, obviously the animation is the first thing, but also it's just, I think sometimes the Holy Mountain uses shock value, or tries to use shock value a little bit differently than this, or more often than this. That's just my take on that. Dancing Sean might be able to speak to that different. Maybe that's for season 2. We'll have myself, and Sean on for Holy Mountain.
Weird. So they were part of that, but we talked about Poor a little earlier. If you look up his art, he is very much his vision. Super, like I know other people were involved in designing it, but you can just look at his art and it's just all over the place. I wonder how many creatures were designed by other people, for example. You know what I mean? Like how you might see in Star Wars, one person is responsible for half of the creatures. Yeah.
Well, and you know what's? I'm glad you brought up Star Wars, okay? Because I'm not I enjoy Star Wars. I've seen pretty much everything with the exception of the animated stuff. I thought that I was trying to think of like something that's sci-fi that enough people will know, and Star Wars was the thing, of course, that I thought of. Because so Star Wars does a pretty good job, I think, of having things that are non-Earth looking, involved in the series. Some of the life forms, some of the beings are very much non-humanoid. But I still think, even with that, like that doing a very good job, this movie still goes so much further outside of that.
I agree. I think the other movie is not sci-fi that I think of in terms of showing doing a really good job of showing an alien type of being like that we don't necessarily conceive of, is the Dark Crystal.
And I was going to bring it when you're talking about like dark children, you're like, I don't know anything that's this dark. I was going to be like, well, what about the Dark Crystal? I know
and
another
actually,
favorite of yours.
now that I think about it, they have to deal with the Gelflings have to deal with trying to be exterminated too, being used for all their resources. I can't believe I didn't think about that comparison.
That parallel, yeah.
Totally. That there is that as well. But there's just little things like when they're walking and all the leaves are moving and they're little creatures on their own, or there's the little puffball of Fizzgig. There's just some alien types that are very alien.
You had talked about, I saw it in your notes, the intestine when it rains. That scene
as
well.
When they're like walking on it and it's just...
Yeah, like little hernias.
That also, I think part of what did a really good job at making Fantastic Planet, making it seem so alien, so unique, is that in those scenes where they're learning, right, with the headset, you're thinking you're learning about the planet, but the words just aren't words that are in our world. So it's like the lake, this fibular sea is 250 lakes tall.
Tarlocks, yeah.
It's just I can't even repeat it. There's just a bunch of words that sound almost like human words.
Yes,
to me.
The OMS live in, and I don't know if for some reason I always pronounce it as an acronym, but the UAVs, the
UAVs.
UAVs. Yeah, no, that was I thought that was very interesting. One thing I did take from that. So obviously the main character, as we've said, as we've talked about quite a bit, his name's Terre, right? Which is the French word for Earth.
Yes,
Which
yes.
and that's what they named their satellite or their moon, which another moon,
Yeah,
fancy word
it's
for
their
moon.
artificial, moon.
Yeah, which is where all the Ohms eventually go to live and have their peaceful existence. So did you have anything else for strongest performance? Besides,
I'll just say support his design, assuming it was his creature design in particular. I think it was. Yeah, I would like to know more about who else actually did those designs, but there wasn't really clear information. Not like today, if they released an art of book, which I love collecting those, where they would actually give you names for who drew certain things.
For sure. Or you can go onto YouTube and see 1,000 interviews with the directors, the art directors, these people who are involved, and just, really, really kind of get inside their heads of what was going on when they're making it. You don't have to try to extrapolate anything. We had, when we were talking about some of the allegorical stuff, I had mentioned, it's important at times to kind of take a step back and look at the context of history, especially when you're watching a movie from the past. And, so in doing so, I had this thought, and again, it was kind of late, but it was just more so, well, actually, yeah, we'll keep going with this one because I wasn't sure if we want to do the interpretation of the end since you had mentioned it, but no. So what we're going to have is, in 1968, there's a book that comes out. It's called Chariots of the Gods, and this book is largely credited for the birthing of the ancient aliens, kind of movement. And here we have, the movie that takes place, and then at the very end we kind of see the movie is kind of framed as like a lesson that the Drog is getting, right? So we're kind of getting like, hey, this is the history of how the Ohms and this second artificial satellite came to be. And so to me it's like, and then when you take into consideration that their artificial satellite is Terra, so another word for Earth, it did kind of just bring these ideas of ancient aliens to mind. That combined with these ideas like that we've had these more recent disclosures, of acknowledging from governments that there are these unidentified aerial phenomenon, not UFOs. They're UAPs now. So was there anything of that you took away from it? And if not, then where do you stand on aliens?
100%, I believe in aliens.
Okay.
For sure. There's no doubt in my mind that when you look at our tiny little planet, we are the only species. That is insane to me. So I there's 0% chance. I don't think that in my lifetime it'll ever cross over. I don't think I'll see aliens. That would be nice, but the odds of that are so tiny that like during humanity's whole existence that we would meet another, whatever. I'm not going to get too into that, but I don't necessarily know what I think about the UAPs. I have been keeping track of that. I don't know exactly what I think about that, but I definitely think that they exist.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm one that definitely thinks that depending on how long we're all lucky enough to live, I think that we'll see it in our lifetime. Some sort of announcement, some sort of like, hey, this is out there. We know this.
Yeah, and see, the other thing that people I would like to emphasize is that when I think of alien life forms, oftentimes I'm not thinking of our sentient style life forms.
Correct.
Like if we find some bacteria, that's an alien life form.
Yes, which I think is almost a what is it? The moons of Saturn or Jupiter, one of the two planets. There's I think it's almost like the likelihood that they have these little underwater tubes that are like vents that are living, we have them in our ocean floors. The odds that those exist on one of the moons is very high. So, I'm saying, I think that there's something, I think that in our lifetime, we're going to be seeing some sort of disclosure where, yes, it's maybe more significant than even that. And I think we're kind of being conditioned right now for that, just with everything that we're slowly being spoon fed. I don't necessarily believe in ancient aliens theory. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we were put here by aliens. But I do think that it's interesting considering the timing of when the Chariots of the Gods comes out, and then this movie starting around that time period. I do wonder if there was some inspiration of this idea of like, oh, hey. And then again, we kind of touched on the idea that there could be these themes of like knowledge and science challenging, religion and dogma, and technology and science being the thing that's going to lead us to freedom, or the unshackling of our species.
Talking about, I suppose, the context and the time period, it's kind of like a weird thing for me because the book was written earlier. But I still think you have to look at why it was made and the time period it was made, adapted, and the moon landing that happened in 1969.
Yeah.
And so just the very idea of humanity being on a moon, living there, totally strikes hard at what a lot of people were thinking about in the early 1970s.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. No, outer space, had replaced the Wild West 1,000% as far as like taking up, the imaginations of the mainstream. So people were obsessed with this idea of what was out there and what could be out there. Yeah. And, it's also interesting, just to note, and again, I'm not trying to really like push or peddle any sort of ancient aliens theories, but I will say a lot of the UFO phenomenon starts around this time, the 50s, 60s, 70s. That's like in its heyday. So, I don't know. Perhaps there's more smoke to that fire.
So perhaps all the UAPs are just like drog head bubbles flying around up and down way quicker than could possibly, happen.
Well, I saw, this is a meme, I think, or maybe it was a tweet that turned into a meme, but someone said, what if all the UFOs we've seen are just alien billionaires flying around? So could be. I want to talk about your interpretation of the end of this movie, because to me, as I said, it's, we all of a sudden, we get this story of Terror and the Ohms, how they kind of achieve their freedom and a peaceful existence. And then we kind of see it as, a drag child getting a lesson on all of this. And that's, kind of how the story is being told and framed. Before I go on my interpretation, did you have any hot takes on this?
I think I know what your interpretation is going to be, so okay. I'll hold off on one of them because I'm curious and I want to be able to agree with you. But one, straight off the bat, I really like the framing device of having of when they zoom out and it's like a young girl learning about this. It's just really sweet. It made me, hopeful, I suppose. But they're celebrating living entirely separately. I don't know about that being that much to celebrate or that good of a solution. I also just kind of had questions about how the Alms survived there.
Right. Yes.
And I kind of just have questions about the whole process, how they made the artificial satellite and then put them all on there. That's another movie. That would be interesting. I mean, I have to assume that Master Sin was important. Like, we don't see a lot of him, but he's clearly a force of reasonableness on that council, who recognizes that they're learning. So probably he was part of that. They lived so long that Tiwa would have been part of all that, and probably Tiwa knew that the satellite was named after Ter. That had to be interesting for the Drog's perspective, which isn't really the symbolism that you were asking me about, but in terms of it leaves a lot of questions.
It does. And that's what I said earlier. Like, this movie does leave a lot of questions in terms of if you're interested in world building, right? Like, which of course you and I are, right? Like, we're from that kind of school where that's what we love. We dig our fingers into it. We're used to like just being able to spend hours. And there's not a lot of it. Go ahead.
Sean points out most important thing was that girl has her own pet too, but it's like a lizard, like an iguana type thing.
That was my big hot take. My takeaway is that out of all this, what did they really learn? They just replaced ohms for another species. They just found something else and they're repeating it all over. They didn't really learn anything from it. That was my takeaway. That's what I thought the point was.
See, part of what I see as well is just mutually assured destruction, which you mentioned, like, you named it in passing, but that's what happened here.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. And same kind of thing where they have to put up a wall between themselves and another society. And because we have weapons, you can't fight with us. I don't think that's really that enlightened of an outcome. And I think pointing out that girl had her own pet too, yes, that shows that it isn't as hopeful as it maybe comes across.
That was I'm glad someone else picked that up. Sean says almost every scene we got the question, what the hell? It does. I mean, it's really like it's a beautiful, weird, unique, wonderful movie. One thing that we did totally fail to mention, and I put this on me, when kind of laying out the context of history, is also the Cold War. We're on the kind of the height of the Cold War. We're talking about mutual destruction, the arms race. As Russia and the United States are building up, these nuclear stockpiles. It really was this idea of like, we're the rest of the world was like just hoping that it didn't pop off, based off the idea of like mutual destruction. Like if someone starts it, then it's going to go downhill extremely, extremely fast.
They make it abundantly clear with them actually building a rocket,
Yes.
dealing with some heavy duty machinery right there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just thought, the ending, it is somewhat abrupt too, it is some, again, like I was paying it, I was very, one thing I do whenever a movie's chosen is I just look at the run times, and it's not because it's just kind of like I need to know, is this something I can, I need to set aside a large chunk of time for. So when I saw this, I was like, okay, so I was kind of, I knew it was coming to an end shortly. And I was just wondering how they're going to wrap it all up, and then it all gets wrapped up. It ends somewhat abruptly. But I appreciate the ending. If indeed it is a commentary that these drogs really didn't learn much, I love it even more.
You were asking about our interpretations of the ending. I don't think we even mentioned something that had me confused, which is, they smash their bodies up when they're the statues, right?
Yeah.
Then the bubbles are just kind of flailing about like they can't see, and then the drogs are running about. I don't really understand that it took away their power.
Well, that was my question to you about the whole meditation thing, because I mean, I'm not. Sean asked if the book ended so abruptly. It's possible. I haven't read it. I do want to read it. I put it again. Another one I put in my queue. But no, I mean, that was my interpret. So I don't know. This is just where I'm going on this, because it was mentioned so frequently, the reproduction differences between the two. My thought was that whatever dancing was very important for their copulation, and perhaps that was their copulation. That's how they copulate as a species and reproduce. And so by destroying the bodies, they're actually destroying their ability or chances to reproduce.
So you think that like they were just upset and like buzzing around like a bee would be? Because it really seemed like their senses were cut off. Maybe it was just that they were so into it that they couldn't adjust right away. I clearly it didn't just kill off a huge swath of them, I don't think.
No, well, again, a total interpretation. This is just my thing. So, for our listeners out there, so what happens is, these beings, the drogs, if you haven't watched the movie yet, when they meditate, essentially you see the beings kind of go into a smaller version of themselves and in these bubbles, and they float away. You don't know where they go. It's learned that they go to this planet where these small bubbles land on these headless statues. And then the bubbles act as the heads, and they dance. They just do a little dance.
A ballroom dance kind of with each other.
And the ohms start breaking the statues. And as Ashaya has mentioned, what happens is the orbs kind of turn into almost like a like you shook up a hornet's nest a little bit. Like they're just like kind of floating around. But my idea is just that this is consciousness. They've lost, they have no real ability to like do anything of physical repercussion. They're just kind of this consciousness state, and those stone bodies.
Mad.
Yeah, those stone bodies were their only, like that was their. It would be like putting consciousness into a machine, right? Like the machine is dead until you like attach the consciousness from it. So it was disconnecting the power source from the thing. So all of a sudden these consciousness just have to float back to their drog bodies on their planets where they're just like, dang, I was banging 2 seconds ago and now I'm stuck over here like with my shitty kid Tiwa and her annoying Ohm pet.
So yeah, you could say that the reason the drog was running, like there, because there's a drog running, and a bunch of them run freaked out because their orbs have been set free. So I guess you can interpret it that they are aware that has happened, but they still are not. Yeah, they've lost able to do anything there. Yeah,
they've lost their ability to reproduce, and it's I think again my interpretation.
The orbs would just like you said float down and return to them. But I still feel like I don't get why a drog wouldn't stay still while their orb comes down, unless perhaps it's painful for them and it was a hugely jarring thing, like it could have hurt them.
Yeah, so I guess it's either like it's a jarring, painful thing, or the minute the disconnection happens, they return to their bodies almost instantaneously, and then you're seeing the ones just being like they return back to their consciousness, and then the realization hits them.
Well, their eyes are not red.
Oh, you're right.
They're still in that weird meditation form, which is also I'm like, can they see? They're running around. What's this? It's
like a chicken with its head cut off.
Yeah, completely.
To a degree. There's. I feel like we could probably like come back to this movie a month later and just have a lot more thoughts about it. Depending on the different states of mind in which you watch it under. I forgot to mention this on the top. You are I did mention that you're watching the TMC podcast. Don't forget to hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber already, please subscribe. And if you're not on the Facebook group, get over to the Facebook group. This is probably a good time to announce our next guest. And Ashaya, I think you'll be very excited about these next guests. We have Chloe and Eliana from Girls Gone Canon. Oh. They're going to be, and I normally don't do this. I normally don't, tell the movies for tomorrow's polls this early, but I do want to reward. We've had the chat is, has been popping off for a TMC podcast, and so I want to reward the people that have been that stuck around, that showed up. The movies we're going to vote on tomorrow in the Facebook group are you have Thor Ragnarok, Into the Spider-Verse, 10 Things I Hate About You, and Dazed and Confused. So
Into the Spider-Verse should win anything ever. And on the subject of that, in terms of animated films, it's either this movie or Into the Spider-Verse for my favorite animated movie of all time. It's only not a slam dunk one way or another because Into the Spider-Verse has only been out a few years. I have to give it time.
Yeah, you are a list maker. And that's the one thing I really enjoyed about having you and Sean on here, having list makers, people who are into movies. Really quick, give us your top 3 movies.
Wet Hot American Summer is my favorite comedy. I would say Dark Crystal. I don't know. I don't want to say top 3. Wet Hot American Summer, Dark Crystal, Fantastic Planet.
You can name a couple more.
Scott Pilgrim, Into the Spider-Verse. That's 5. That's a top 5. I will name. You asked me another day, I would have given you a different top 5, except always Wet Hot American Summer is number 1.
Always Wet Hot.
It makes me laugh like nothing other every time.
I do appreciate that. Also, you you like to, you're a little cautious. You don't you like to give yourself a little distance from something before you put it up there. I struggle with Jojo Rabbit in that same way, where I want to put it immediate. True Romance has been my favorite movie for a really long time. And, I really think that Jojo Rabbit might have supplanted it. We've covered both movies this season, by the way. So,
but yeah, when you have 10 years or more, whatever, of distance between you and something, it's really hard to compare it. There's such recency bias, and you don't know how it'll stand the test of time. There's so many factors, but the very fact that it's close says a lot.
For sure.
When I'm weighing something like that, I think a lot about what makes something my favorite movie or what I think the best movies are. So those are also my favorite, not what I think the best movies are.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good distinction. And Into the Spider-Verse, that I'm not sure where it ranks in my animated list. I'd have to like really kind of go back and look at that. But it is one I've watched recently with my son Shep. He really enjoyed it. I loved it. I immediately text another buddy who has some older children, was like, dude, if you're not watching this or if you haven't watched this yet, you have to get on it. This is amazing. I really
I'm looking right now. I have a whole set of beautiful, I have like 6 prints from Into the Spider-Verse on a corner in my wall that a friend of mine did. So I have a whole corner for that movie.
Yeah, no, I was in just and I'm not a big just for the record, I'm not a huge superhero person,
Neither am I.
Okay, so so you would think that I was kind of disappointed when our next guest put 2 superhero movies up, but also Jojo Rabbit I just mentioned, one of my favorite movies, maybe my favorite movie of all time now, directed by Taika Waititi, who also did Thor Ragnarok. So
you get to talk about that. Have you seen all of his other movies?
So
what of his other stuff have you seen?
So I've seen Eagle vs. Shark. I've seen
that's a weird movie. I don't like that movie that much, to be honest.
Oh, see, I didn't. I guess
out of all of his stuff, I mean, it was early days. It was just a little too like quirky.
Yeah.
Like,
see, I was
tried overly hard to be quirky.
Yeah, I mean, I was a huge Flight of the Conchords fan at the time.
And I'm a huge fan of that as well.
Okay, so like I was immediately Jermaine. I was like drawn to. There's just some scenes in it that are just so great. The scene where he's like, "This is Justice calling." He's like, "Justin,"
Justin.
I just really enjoy that. Or I'm so complex. The one with
there's like Boy and Hunt for the Wilder People.
Hunt of the Wilder People I've seen. I haven't seen Boy.
And of course, What We Do in the Shadows.
What We Do in the Shadows, yes.
I guess now after Jojo Rabbit and Thor Ragnarok, his third most famous movie, I suppose. But it's what I think of when I think of Taika. Is What We Do in the Shadows, which they've really built an empire on, a whole franchise between. I mean, you've got Wellington Paranormal, What We Do in the Shadows, the TV series, and the movie.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And I think that when you look at the last 10 years of film and you try to, being a list maker as you will, we did the first movie we did was MacGruber, and part of the reason we covered that movie was Collider had put out a list of their top 20 or maybe it was 25 comedies of the last 10 years. And MacGruber was ranked number 1. Now,
interesting.
Just kind of going back and thinking when I was making my own list, Taka had 3, I think, of, for me, like, so just I think it really speaks to the career he's had and, what he's done.
It's funny you mentioned that, looking at a top comedy movie list, because just like a week ago I was trying to decide. I was listing comedy movies and thinking about what made a comedy movie, and all the lists, it was so hard on IMDb and all of that stuff to find a comedy movie, because they count things that have comedy as their third genre or their second genre. That they're not a comedy movie, they have comedy in it. They're funny sometimes. Like the number 1 comedy movie on IMDb was Parasite. And I was like, that's not a comedy. So you don't recommend someone a comedy and say, here's Parasite.
Would you say Jojo Rabbit is a comedy?
I think it is. I think it's a comedy first. It's dark. Like, it made me cry a lot. I mean, I cried from the opening. Like, I'm not like, I cried from the opening moments of that movie, even though, like, I know it's a comedy, but you can't ignore what it's about. So yeah, it made me very emotional the whole way through. So like, lots of things made me laugh, but I might have cried more than I laughed, to be honest. So that one's more different strokes, I suppose. I lean towards comedy.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. I mean,
but yeah, some of them are hard. It's a weird line where it's hard for me to decide. But I did come up with mine, and What We Do in the Shadows was in my top 5. So Taika got in there.
Yeah, there you go. So do you have the list in front of you?
I do. I know it. Well, obviously, Wet Hot American Summer. Yeah. Next would be Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh, Cameron Crowe.
Yeah. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. What We Do in the Shadows. Groundhog Day, which Sean was making the argument to me that he didn't think it was much of a comedy. It wasn't as much of a straight comedy, which I guess I should rewatch it. It always made me laugh. And I know, regardless, I think it's a great movie, but maybe it isn't as funny to me now as it would have been, and it's more just sad. I'm not sure. Clerks, Clueless, 8th Grade, Best in Show. There's the top 10.
Do you know my connection to the movie Groundhog Day?
No, I don't know No.
So Groundhog Day was filmed in the town that I grew up and was born in, Woodstock, Illinois. So it takes the movie itself takes place in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, but it was filmed in Woodstock. And Bill Murray called me a moron on the filming. I was like in 3rd grade, and my cousin asked to take a picture with them. He wanted to know who was going to take the picture. He pointed to me and he said, "You're going to let this moron take a picture?" So that's my little claim to fame.
That's great.
Yeah. And you know what? I do think it's a comedy. I'm surprised by how Groundhog Day has taken on this like philosophical, almost like religious type of film role. You know, it's become this very deep film for a lot of people. Have
you seen Palm Springs? That's that Andy Samberg, Christian Milioti movie. No. I recommend it to any fan of Groundhog Day, to any fan of comedy, I suppose. It was a funny movie, a dark movie. I like that sort of subject matter. I like a movie with a hook, a twist sometimes, you know. There's like a blast from the past, and I'm a sucker for it. I just like Secret to My Success. Like they're like a funny I was trying to quantify it a long time ago what it is, that weird little thing, but those movies count.
Yeah, for sure. So Secret to My Success, was that a Michael J. Fox movie?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
but it's just one of those ones where like he's pretending to be the real businessman. I don't know, it's a weird comparison, but it has that same thrill to it.
For sure.
To me.
God, I haven't heard that movie in a long time. That was one I grew up on.
I wouldn't even say I love that movie or anything like that, or I've seen it a long time, but the very concept of it is fun to me. Same with, Groundhog Day and Palm Springs, which you should definitely check, especially if you're an Andy Samberg fan at all, which I think
I do enjoy Andy Samberg.
He's great. It's a good movie.
Awesome. I will check that out. Ashaya, thank you for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun. I hope everyone out there has enjoyed us breaking this down. And I guess I'll just really quickly throw it to the chat. Any questions in the chat for us? I didn't see anything.
I would like to point out that Sean weighed in on Jojo Rabbit.
He did. I saw that. He believes it is a drama first, war movie second, comedy third. I can't argue with that. I mean, I know it's super cliche for people to say like, "Oh, it made me laugh, it made me cry," but that, you talked about your own experience with it. I don't know. I can't remember a film that truly made me laugh and cry and feel and like go through that full spectrum of emotions as much as that movie has. Where the laughs were so deep and so genuine.
I mean, I don't know how many war movies I could think of that aren't a drama in terms of him naming a war movie first and second that
I mean, I can think of a couple, but they're so out there and silly that it's
Okay.
like Tropic Thunder. I mean, like
Okay, yeah, there we go. Thanks. I wanted to hear an example or two to kind of put
I mean
myself in that mindset.
that's the first one. Hot Shots Part 2. I think of more of like the parody.
Okay, I don't know
films.
that one. I don't know that one,
Or
but
Hot Shots. There was it was a Charlie Sheen movie that was like a parody on like the Top Gun movies and like a lot of those like 80s of the
okay,
times.
yeah, parodies and satire, yeah, those would exist.
But yeah, and I guess we didn't do. It's probably a good time now that we're talking about this. We do have a segment called Cosmic Giggles where we kind of talk about unintentional connections, parallels between some of the movies that we've connected. Jojo Rabbit touches on the Holocaust, or focuses on the Holocaust.
Totally.
This, we have the Holocaust here. We talked about our coverage of the movie Almost Famous, which focuses on music and is in large part the music is a character in that, similar to this. I would say also you had talked about was it Roland Topar, was he, or Topar, was he the one with the relatives who escaped the
Yes,
the Holocaust. So the director of The Graduate was his parents came over as refugees from the Holocaust as well. So there's a connection there as well. And I think
Sean brings up Watership Down as a comparison. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm curious. I don't, and I have a reason for that, which is that Watership Down, both the book and the movie, creeped me out so much that I never read or watched them, and I never will.
I don't think I'm familiar with Watership Down.
Okay, so neither of us can say, but it's anthropomorphic animals, which I can see how there would be comparisons there. I can guess that there is concern about humans killing them or something. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, definitely it's, you did touch on this where, when we're talking about some of the parallels to other films, the themes of this movie, while extremely deep and, it's not that they're very uncommon, these ideas of human rights, animal rights, genocide, slavery, these have been touched on by a lot of films. So I imagine that there's probably, if you're looking, at that sort of level, you're going to see a bunch of those parallels. I do think that is it for the questions. I did look, we didn't have anything from our in our emails. So Ashaya, I do appreciate you coming out. You can catch History of Westeros on Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anywhere else you want to let people know where they can catch you, Ashaya?
You can always follow me on Twitter at Miranisnot. I like to make the joke that I had no idea that Twitter usernames should be short. So mine is like incredibly long. It's silly, but you can follow me there. That would be fine. Sometimes I tweet about movies and TV shows. Lately, I tweet about books more. I've been reading a lot. It's great.
Gosh, I need to read more.
I've read more books in the last 2 months than I read all last year.
Oh wow!
It's been great.
I complain about A Song of Ice and Fire because it's kind of spoiled me where if I pick up a book that's not good and I don't like it, it normally leads to me going back and like picking up A Song of Ice and Fire and doing a reread there. So I've read A Song of Ice and Fire a decent amount, most recently with the Valar rereaders. But anytime I pick up a book and I'm just not into it, I just end up going back to Game of Thrones and then go through the 5 books that we have waiting for number 6. Anything else you want to plug? What are you guys working on next? You guys have had Dancing Sean on talking about.
We have him on every week. Aziz and on Radio Westeros, we're working on the next Dance of the Dragons episode. I know they want to be done soon. I'm in the boat where they finish and they give they're like, okay, turnaround is 2 days. And I'm like, I would have loved to have this for a week and been able to like take my time. So basically I won't know until it's happening. Aziz and I are very much procrastinators. We're very much like, give us a deadline and we'll do it at the end of the deadline.
Yeah,
but we'll get it all done. Like, we will do it, and we're good at that, but we do it.
Yeah, I can relate to that very much, as you can probably tell by when I got my notes over to you. So make sure you're going over, you are subscribing and checking out History of Westeros and checking out Ashaya on Twitter. Make sure, if you haven't already, hit that like button there on YouTube, and you are following us on our Facebook group and anywhere else where you might find TKOK related podcasts. So that goes for our umbrella podcast, Pop Moms Podcast, and Concerts That Made Us. Check them out too. Everyone, thank you. We are excited to have Eliana and Chloe on for our next movie. So make sure you go to the Facebook group and vote. Remember, that's Into the Spider-Verse, Thor Ragnarok, 10 Things I Hate About You, and Days Confused. I think it's a nice collection. I think that they
I can tell you my ranking, by the way.
Let's do it.
If I would go Into the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse, Dazed and Confused, Thor Ragnarok, 10 Things I Hate About You. I think 10 Things I Hate About You was very overrated, personally.
See, and you know
I liked it, but I overrated in that people talk about it way more than I think it deserves.
That's fair. So for me, 10 Things I Hate About You has a very, very close place in my heart because one of my first crushes was Larissa Oleynik. She may be familiar to some of you as Alex Mack. I wrote her a fan letter in the 7th grade and sent her a picture of myself without my shirt on flexing, thinking that would actually be something that Larissa Oleynik would be into and would cause her to write me back.
I cannot imagine what you would have done if you were on social media at that age.
Oh my God. Yeah, I would have been slipping into her DMs at a rapid pace to the point of maybe having a some form of restraining order against me. Yeah, you know what's surprisingly, and spoiler alerty, I did not get a letter back from Larissa Oleynik. Nothing signed, nothing. But you know what? It didn't make me harbor any ill feelings. I was a big supporter of her and her career, and as we've already mentioned, I would love to talk about another Taka film. Dazed and Confused is one that I grew up on, and I just love the idea of being able to make everyone feel old when we talk about the idea if Dazed and Confused was made today, they would be talking about kids who were in high school in 2003. So
that is weird. Thankfully, I wasn't in high school in 2003, or it'd be weirder to me, but still weird. I am hoping, by the way, that if you like panned your camera around, there's a poster of Alex Mack maybe somewhere in that room.
Like I said, we keep the Alex Mack stuff that's upstairs in the master bed. That's something we keep for private time. No, I wish I did. I really need to get something Alex Mack related in here.
I know her, by the way. I loved her always from the Babysitters Club.
Oh, there you go.
That movie. She is an important character. So
yeah. Shout out to Larissa Oleynik, probably a fan and listener of the TMC podcast, I imagine. So yeah, join us. That episode will be August 9th. And again, that's Chloe and Eliana from Girls Gone Canon.
Who's on next week?
That is our next one. So
okay.
So we have 10 days between episodes. That gives people a little more time to watch the movies. We're still doing some scheduling stuff, but there is a very good chance that the following episode, the 23rd of August, will be our last episode of season 1. Stay tuned for more information on that. Then we'll just take a short break. New Dad will kick up a little bit, and then we'll start back on the movie club season 2. And scheduling some more great guests. I've been really impressed. I know that I've gotten some compliments, via email on the guests that we've had. We have, I've actually impressed myself. People like yourself, Ashaya, Dancing Sean. We've had Daryl Mansell. Just the list goes on and on. And now we get to add Chloe and Eliana. I was thinking like maybe I should just like
Is-
keep season 1 going until I have Radio Westeros and not a podcast. And
Is this the first twofer you've done? Two
Just me?
people?
just one.
Like,
No, I
just
did
you
one.
and two people.
I've done no, I did. It might be the first two for Jojo Rabbit. We had actually 4 people. We
Okay.
had Brett Gray and then a couple from Ohio, and then I'm trying to think if we ever did a twofer.
Okay.
Yeah,
They might be your first duo on.
it could be my first. It could be your first trifecta where you get myself and 2 other people.
Your first threesome.
Yep, that would for sure, 1,000% be my first threesome. One is enough for me normally. But yeah, no, this will. I'm really looking forward to it, and like I said, as a huge A Song of Ice and Fire fan, to be able to talk to people that I've listened to and that I look up to as content creators, it's just it's a bucket list thing for me, and it's what makes this whole thing worth it. So thank you again.
I mean, you're doing a great job. You're a great host. I'm sure you are aware of that deep down, even if you are self-deprecating. You keep going at a nice, good pace, asking lots of good questions with a good document.
Well,
Solid, great work.
I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from someone like yourself, Ashaya, who is the best. We'll see you guys all on the 9th with the folks from Girls Gone Canon. You guys all take care of yourself, and Tickles loves you. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.